Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we sift through fascinating sources, pull out the most important nuggets, and connect the dots in ways that might just rearrange your brain a little. Today, we're inviting you to consider something truly profound, something that touches on how we as humans have always mapped our worlds. Imagine the ancient stories whispered around a flickering fire, intricately weaving a path across the land. Then, picture the impossibly complex patterns inside our very own brains, forming maps of our experiences. And now, zoom way out to the vast cosmic tapestry of galaxies stretching across the universe. What if these seemingly disparate scales of mapping aren't just analogous, but are actually connected by a surprising universal principle?
It's a truly mind-bending proposal, isn't it? The core idea we're diving into today is the proposition that memory, whether it's the rich tapestry of cultural knowledge passed down through generations, our own individual thoughts and how we navigate space, or even the fundamental structure of the cosmos itself, might not be primarily organized by precise quantifiable distances, the kind we usually associate with maps or blueprints. Instead, our sources suggest it's fundamentally organized by something more qualitative, something called topological connectivity. Think of it less like a precise GPS coordinate telling you exactly where you are and more like a subway map, showing you how everything connects, how you get from one station to the next, regardless of the exact mileage. It's about relationships.
So the connections are the map, not the ruler. I love that analogy. And to explore this incredibly potent idea, we've pulled together three seemingly disparate fields, all based on the phenomenal sources we've been immersing ourselves in. First, we'll unearth the ancient, powerful memory techniques embedded in Indigenous Australian songlines. Then we'll take a deep dive into cutting-edge neuroscience, looking at how our brain, the hippocampus, actually forms its spatial maps. And finally, we'll blast off into cosmology with its startling, almost unbelievable comparisons between the network of galaxies and, surprisingly enough, the human brain.
Our mission today is to extract the most important insights from these incredibly diverse sources, connect the dots in surprising ways, and really explore those aha moments that arise when these ideas collide. We're asking, what if there's a deeper, universal principle governing how all information is stored, regardless of its scale, from a single memory to the universe itself? What's the secret language of memory?
Let's start this incredible journey at the beginning, with ancient maps and the embodied topology of knowledge. Our first deep dive nugget comes from the truly profound world of Australian Aboriginal songlines. Before I read these sources, songline felt a bit abstract to me, but the research reveals just how incredibly practical, precise, and powerful these systems are.
That's right. At their core, songlines are ancient, multimodal narratives. We're talking about an intricate blend of songs, specific dances, detailed paintings, and even carvings that Australian Aboriginal communities have meticulously used for thousands upon thousands of years. They've used them to encode and transmit vast amounts of incredibly precise information, all without ever relying on a written alphabet. Imagine passing down an entire encyclopedia of knowledge covering generations through nothing but song, movement, and visual art. It's an oral tradition of unparalleled complexity and retention.
So, what exactly do these songlines store? It's far more than just a few simple facts, isn't it? Our sources explain they contain everything from incredibly detailed geography of the land, knowing where every rock and waterhole is, to intricate clan law, complex genealogies, and the cycles of the seasons. They embed precise astronomical observations, crucial for navigation and predicting events, and even practical resource management strategies, telling you exactly when and where certain foods will be available. And it's not one giant universal songline for all. Each clan has its own unique songlines, which are meticulously learned, cared for, and carefully guarded by elders, passed down generation after generation. It's like an entire living, breathing library that spans millennia.
And here's where it truly gets fascinating from a memory science perspective. Songlines are not abstract. They are profoundly grounded in specific landscape features. To recall the vast information contained within a songline, you don't just mentally recite it, you physically walk the actual route across the land. As you walk, you sing verses that correspond to and connect with an ordered sequence of real, physical landmarks, a particular rock formation, a specific tree, a waterhole. This isn't abstract mental gymnastics, it's profoundly embodied knowledge. You are literally walking your memories using your body and the land as a mnemonic device.
So their meaning isn't about, say, go exactly 3.7 kilometers north, then turn 45 degrees east. It's something different, something you call topological. What does that mean in this context for how they store information?
Right, it means they record sequences of places and the relationships between them. Think adjacency. This place is next to that place. Think connectivity. This path connects these 2 points. And think cyclic return. This journey eventually brings you back to where you started. The order of places and the connections between them are absolutely fixed and crucial, but the precise metric distances or angles between those points might be less important than the qualitative relationship. It's about how one place relates to the next, not just how far apart they are in meters or miles. The sources even mentioned that the symbolic and geometric patterns found in Aboriginal artworks contain encoded information to which casual or untrained observers may be completely oblivious to. It's a hidden language, incredibly rich in meaning, that uses the topology of the land and narrative to store vast amounts of data for those who understand its profound structure.
That notion of a journey, of connections rather than precise points, immediately made me think of Western memory techniques. The classic memory palace or method of loci. How do songlines compare to that, given this idea of topological mapping?
That's a great connection. The classical memory palace method, as you know, involves imagining a very familiar building, your house, a school, a grand palace, and mentally placing items you want to remember along a specific imagined path within that structure. To recall, you mentally walk through this inner palace, retrieving the items attached to each location. It's a powerful and proven mnemonic, but the recent research by Reeser and colleagues highlights some crucial distinctions when comparing it to the Aboriginal method.
So what were those key differences? I was struck by how much more integrated and communal the songline approach seemed, especially when compared to what's often a solitary Western practice.
Exactly. First, and this is a massive distinction, songlines are anchored to actual real-world landscapes, not imaginary ones. This real-world grounding, this physical interaction with the environment, provides a fundamentally different and perhaps deeper kind of mnemonic power. Second, and this is truly crucial, songlines are learned through community and ritual, not primarily through individual solitary practice. This communal aspect, shared experience and repeated performance, immensely strengthens the knowledge and its transmission across generations. And third, songlines deeply integrate moral and spiritual narratives. They're not just about navigation or botany, they're about identity, ancestral beings, and the very fabric of existence. This integration provides far richer, more complex associative hooks than simply placing a shopping list item in a mental room. They connect knowledge to deep meaning, to culture, to cosmology, making the information sticky in a profound way.
And Razorrod didn't just theorize about this, they ran an empirical study to test it, didn't they? That's what always fascinates me, putting these ancient ideas to a modern scientific test. Tell us about that experiment.
They certainly did, and it's a testament to their innovative approach. They designed an experiment with incoming medical students, a group known for their high cognitive abilities and need to absorb vast amounts of information. They divided these students into 3 groups: an untrained control group, a memory palace group, and an Aboriginal method group. The Aboriginal technique was taught using a carefully constructed rock garden, which represented various landmarks, mimicking the physical journey aspect of traversing a songline in a controlled setting. The students physically moved through this garden, associating information with its features.
And the results were quite compelling. It sounds like the ancient wisdom held its own, and then some, against modern techniques.
Absolutely. The group taught the Aboriginal technique recalled significantly more items after just a single learning session compared to both the untrained group and the memory palace group. But here's an equally important detail. They also rated the experience as far more meaningful and enjoyable compared to the other groups. This suggests that the method isn't just effective, but also deeply engaging on a personal and emotional level, fostering a connection to the knowledge itself.
Now, it's always important to look at the full picture, including any limitations or cultural nuances that researchers themselves highlight. What did Reiser et al. Caution about their findings, especially when we think about applying this more broadly?
They were very clear and vocal on the cultural safety concerns surrounding their work. They emphasized the critical need for experienced Aboriginal educators to teach these methods, highlighting the significant risk of misrepresentation, trivialization, or even outright misappropriation if the techniques are delivered without deep cultural understanding and respect. Songlines are not just cognitive hacks that can be easily extracted and applied. They are living, sacred cultural systems, intrinsically linked to identity, land, and spiritual beliefs. Their power comes from this holistic integration, not just their mnemonic efficiency.
Right. And there were some acknowledged constraints in the study itself, right? Things that might limit how broadly we can generalize their very interesting findings.
Yes, they noted a ceiling effect because their participants were already very high-achieving medical students. Many were already excellent memorizers, which meant it was harder to detect even greater differences between the techniques at the very top end of performance. Essentially, they were already bumping up against the limits of the task. Also, the item list they used was potentially too short for the learning time allotted, meaning some participants completed the task very quickly, possibly obscuring longer-term benefits. And a significant limitation, which they acknowledged, was the limited long-term retention assessment. Only a small subset of participants were followed up after 6 weeks, so the true long-term benefits weren't rigorously measured.
So how do we reframe these limitations? They don't negate the findings, but perhaps point us to future avenues of exploration.
Precisely. Despite these constraints, the study powerfully illustrates that embedding information in a structured journey through physical or imagined space can dramatically enhance recall. It strongly supports the idea that information linked sequentially in an ordered nerve complex is more robustly remembered. More critically, it underscores that knowledge systems are profoundly embedded in cultural contexts. You simply can't extract a technique without appreciating its meaning, its moral framework, and the cultural tapestry it comes from. It's a call for respectful, collaborative engagement, not just scientific extraction.
Fascinating. So we've explored this ancient wisdom and how it seems to intrinsically map information topologically. But what's truly fascinating is how this ancient embodied way of knowing might actually mirror what's happening inside our very own heads at a neurological level. It gets really interesting here.
Indeed. Our next source dives into the cutting-edge work of Dabagian and colleagues who propose a radical reframing of how our hippocampus, that vital memory hub deep in the brain, forms its spatial maps. Traditionally, for decades, these maps were thought to represent very precise geometric information, exact distances, angles, and coordinates, much like a typical street map you'd use for navigation, where every point has a precise XY location.
But their new paradigm, their hypothesis, suggests something entirely different, something that aligns uncannily with the songlines we just discussed.
Exactly. The hypothesis is that the hippocampus is far more interested in topological information. Things like connectivity, adjacency, and containment. Is X inside Y? Is A next to B? Does P connect to Q? It prioritizes these relationships rather than precise metric distances. Again, think of it like that subway map. The crucial information isn't the exact physical distance between stations or the precise curve of the tracks. It's which stations are connected and in what order and what loops you can take. The brain, in this view, is a master of relational mapping. It prioritizes how things relate over their exact coordinates.
And this brings us to specific types of cells in the brain, doesn't it? Place cells, we've heard about those before. They're famous for firing when an animal is in a specific location in its environment. But how do they relate to this topological idea? It feels like we're moving from a simple A fires here to something much more complex.
The key insight from Dabagian et al. Is not just that individual place cells fire in specific locations, but what happens when they co-fire. When two or more place cells fire simultaneously or within a very short temporal window, it strongly implies that their respective place fields, the specific regions of space they represent, overlap. This pattern of overlaps, this network of co-firing cells, actually defines what mathematicians call a simplicial complex.
A simplicial complex. Okay, that sounds incredibly technical and a bit intimidating. Can you break that down a bit? It's like, how Lego blocks connect, or maybe a flowchart of ideas.
That's a great way to think about it. Imagine your ideas, or in this case, the locations your brain is trying to map, aren't just separate points. Each place field can be like a single Lego brick, a vertex in this abstract map. Now, if two Lego bricks connect, or if two place fields overlap, you can draw a line between them that's an edge. If three Lego bricks connect perfectly, forming a stable structure, or if three place fields overlap, you form a triangle in this mathematical world, a face in the complex. These collections of connected vertices, edges, and higher dimensional forms, these Lego structures, make up the simplicial complex. And here's where a branch of mathematics called algebraic topology comes in. There's a powerful theorem that states a nerve simplicial complex, which is exactly what we get from these overlapping place fields, can actually reconstruct the topology of the underlying space. So the brain, through the co-firing patterns of its place cells, isn't just taking snapshots, it's building a relational diagram, a kind of structural scaffold of its environment.
Wow. So the brain isn't just taking a snapshot. It's building a dynamic relational diagram of space. And they used a really powerful mathematical tool called persistent homology to explore this, right? It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
That's the powerful mathematical tool they employed in their computational model. Persistent homology isn't about what features exist, but how long they persist as you change your perspective or resolution on the data. It tracks how topological features like connected components, is this place connected to that, loops, can I go in a circle here, or voids, is there a hole in the middle of this space, appear and disappear over time, or with changes in parameters as the system evolves. In their simulation, they modeled a rat exploring an environment, and as it moved, the spikes from its place cells were aggregated into a temporal simplicial complex, basically, these Lego structures of co-firing neurons forming over time.
And what did persistent homology reveal about this complex? What kind of persistent features did they find in the brain's internal maps?
The key finding was that persistent homology could detect robust, stable topological features within the simulated neural activity. For example, it could consistently identify loops in the generated map that corresponded to actual obstacles or circuits in the simulated environment the rat was exploring. This was profound because it showed that neuronal co-firing patterns can convey precise and stable topological information, not just fuzzy general location, within biologically realistic timeframes. The brain was detecting the shape of the space, not just its coordinates.
Okay, and you mentioned a learning region. That sounds like a sweet spot for map formation. What's that all about?
This was a truly crucial discovery in their model. They found that for each combination of specific parameters, such as the firing rate of the place cells, how often they fire, the size of their place fields, how large an area they represent, and the overall ensemble size of the place cells involved. So, how many neurons are working together, there exists a specific learning region or sweet spot. Map formation, meaning the creation of a stable, accurate topological map of the environment, only succeeds if these parameters fall within those particular optimal ranges. Outside this region, the temporal complex derived from the spiking activity fails to stabilize into a coherent, usable map. For instance, if you have a smaller number of neurons, the brain might compensate by having larger place fields or higher firing rates to still achieve a stable map. It's like the brain has a finely tuned dial for optimal memory encoding.
So what does this all mean for our broader understanding of memory and cognition? It sounds like it echoes the songlines in a really profound way. The brain seems to be doing something very similar to what ancient cultures figured out.
It absolutely does. It strongly suggests that hippocampal maps are primarily qualitative, focusing on connections and relationships, on the flow and structure of space, much like the narrative sequencing embedded in songlines. The brain, according to this new paradigm, prioritizes connections over precise coordinates. It's not remembering 3 meters to the left of the door, but the path from the door to the table and then to the window. This has profound implications for how we think about internal representations of space and experience, hinting at a universal principle of relational memory.
Of course, no scientific model, especially one that's pushing the boundaries like this, is perfect. What were some of the simplifications or challenges acknowledged by Debagian et al. In their work?
Right. They made several significant simplifications that are important to note. For example, their model largely ignores the intricate details of real spike trains, like bursting patterns or phase precession, focusing primarily on average firing rates and the size of place fields. They treated place cell firing as a stationary Poisson process, which is a statistical simplification that doesn't capture the full dynamic complexity of real neurons. They also assume that all coactivity is remembered indefinitely, disregarding the crucial biological process of forgetting, which is integral to memory systems. And importantly, they didn't incorporate internal hippocampal dynamics such as the replay of spatial sequences during sharp wave ripples, which are thought to be critical for memory consolidation where the brain reruns its experiences during sleep or rest.
And they focused only on place cells, neglecting other spatial cells like grid cells that also play a huge role in navigation and spatial memory.
Yes, the model primarily focused on place cells, neglecting the contributions of grid cells, border cells, and head direction cells, all of which play vital, complementary roles in how the brain builds its spatial map. These are significant simplifications, and critics could argue that the topological signatures might emerge from even more complex dynamics, or that metric information is encoded elsewhere by these other cells.
So how do we reframe these as opportunities rather than just limitations? It sounds like there's a huge roadmap for future research here.
Exactly. These aren't flaws that invalidate the topological paradigm. Instead, they precisely define the frontiers for future research. They highlight areas where more complex models and empirical validation are desperately needed. This topological approach is a powerful, fresh hypothesis that suggests the brain might be less of a precise cartographer drawing exact maps and more of a master network builder, capturing the essence of relationships and connectivity. It's an invitation for neuroscientists and mathematicians to truly collaborate.
Okay, let's unpack this even further. We've gone from ancient traditions to the inner workings of our brain, and we're seeing this theme of topological mapping emerge. But what if these patterns aren't just in us, aren't just a part of human experience and biology, but are all around us, on a scale we can barely comprehend?
This is where we step into the cosmic scale, and it's perhaps the most unexpected and mind-bending comparison we'll explore today. We're talking about the truly audacious work of Vatsa and Felitti, who dared to compare two systems separated by an astonishing 15 orders of magnitude, the neuronal network of the human brain and the vast filamentary cosmic web of galaxies. It sounds utterly bizarre at first glance, like comparing a grain of sand to an entire beach, but the numbers tell a surprising story.
Right. I mean, what could a tiny neuron possibly have in common with an entire galaxy light years across? The physics are completely different electrochemical signaling versus the immense gravitational pull of dark matter. But somehow these researchers found striking similarities. How is that possible?
That's the beauty of looking at systems through the lens of complex networks. Both are fundamentally complex, interconnected networks. In the brain, you have billions of neurons clustering into circuits, columns, and functional areas, all communicating dynamically. In the universe, you have a vast web of dark matter halos where galaxies reside, connected by immense filaments of gas and dark matter, all surrounding colossal voids. These structures are produced by gravitational collapse over billions of years. Despite the wildly different underlying physics, they exhibit striking morphological similarities, looking uncannily alike when visualized.
So it's not just a vague visual resemblance, they actually applied rigorous quantitative network analysis, right? What do they find specifically beyond just a pretty picture?
They found compelling statistical alignment. For example, when they appropriately rescaled the spatial scales, the power spectra of density fluctuations in slices of both brain tissue and cosmic web simulations showed remarkably similar distributions. Imagine the universe humming a tune, and our brain, despite being a completely different instrument, hums a very similar melody. This is a very specific mathematical similarity in how their densities are distributed. Furthermore, their network analysis revealed that both systems have remarkably high clustering coefficients and long-tail degree distributions compared to what you'd expect in a random network.
High clustering coefficients and long-tail degree distributions. Okay, those sound like academic terms. Can you elaborate on what those mean for us, the listeners, in a more intuitive way?
Of course.
Yeah.
Think of a high clustering coefficient like this. If you have a friend and that friend has a friend, there's a high probability that you are also friends with your friend's friend. In a network, it means nodes tend to form tight-knit groups or modules. So in the brain, neurons cluster into highly interconnected circuits. In the cosmic web, galaxies tend to clump together into clusters. This indicates a lot of local grouping. Now, a long-tailed degree distribution is about connection asymmetry. Most people, or nodes, have only a few connections. That's the head of the tail. But a small number of nodes have a vastly disproportionate number of connections. They are highly central hubs or superconnectors. Think of a celebrity on social media who has millions of followers while most people have hundreds. That's the long tail. This isn't random. Both of these characteristics, high clustering and hub-like nodes, suggest that both the brain and the cosmic web are highly organized, non-random, and self-organized into surprisingly similar hierarchical architectures that optimize for connectivity and information flow.
And what about memory capacity? They even ventured into a tantalizing speculation there, almost spooky numerical coincidence.
Yes, they did, and it's certainly food for thought. Vatsa and Felitti noted the current estimates for the human brain's memory capacity, which is on the order of 2.5 petabytes, that's 2,500 terabytes, a truly immense amount of information. They then speculated that the cosmic web, in terms of the information required to encode its sheer structure and complexity, might require a comparable number of bits. While this is certainly a coincidence and a speculation, it underscores that information theory can potentially be applied to both systems, hinting at common principles of information encoding, storage, and retrieval, even at these vastly different scales.
Again, though, what are the caveats? This sounds almost too good or too wild to be true, doesn't it?
You're right to be cautious. Vatsa and Felitti themselves acknowledge several important limitations. For instance, their analysis was based on 2D slices of both brain tissue and cosmological simulations, not the full 3D connectivity of either system. This means they might be missing crucial information about the true architecture. Also, brain networks are defined by synaptic connections, many of which are long-range, spanning considerable distances across the brain. The Cosmos network, however, is based more on spatial proximity and gravitational attraction. The study's methods were, in their own words, insensitive to these critical differences in connectivity mechanisms. Additionally, the identification of nodes in the brain relied on neurofilament staining, which could potentially misrepresent neuron density or even omit the crucial role of glial cells in the network.
So how should we interpret these findings despite those limitations? Do they still hold profound significance?
Despite these valid critiques, the finding that even relatively simple network parameters converge across such vastly different scales separated by 15 orders of magnitude, is profoundly intriguing. It invites deep speculation about whether universal rules govern the formation of complex networks across all levels of existence, from the microscopic to the macroscopic. And, by extension, it raises the tantalizing possibility that memory and cognition, particularly how our brains organize information, might inherently exploit these very same universal rules. It's a hypothesis that transcends disciplinary boundaries and demands further exploration.
Wow. Okay. So we've gone from ancient wisdom about narrative journeys etched into the land to a new understanding of brain mapping that prioritizes connections and relationships, and now these structural similarities between brains and galaxies. What's truly fascinating here is how all these threads weave together. It feels like we're building towards a truly grand idea, a unifying principle.
We absolutely are. The central motif that powerfully emerges from all three of these seemingly disparate studies, what ties them all together, is this. Connectivity and qualitative relations matter far more than precise metric distance when it comes to organizing and storing information. It's not about the exact location, but about how things are linked.
Let's run through the examples again to really solidify this idea for our listeners. How does this motif of connectivity over metric play out in each domain we've explored?
Okay. For songlines, as we discussed, knowledge is encoded in the sequence of places visited and the narrative relationships among them. The actual precise distances between landmarks might vary, but the established order and the specific connections are fixed and crucial. It's about the journey and its sequence, the relational landscape. In the hippocampus, Debagian and colleagues propose that the brain uses the co-firing and overlapping of place cell fields to generate a topological map that captures adjacency and containment, which places are next to each other or contained within each other, not exact spatial coordinates. It's about which places are connected to which. And in the cosmic brain comparison, both networks exhibit those high clustering coefficients and heavy-tailed degree distributions, indicating that long-distance connections and hierarchical modules are common and structurally similar. This signifies that the way nodes are connected and clustered is key to their architecture, regardless of their precise spatial separation.
So the big conclusion here, the core takeaway, is that memory systems, whether they're cultural knowledge systems, biological neural networks, or even the grand cosmic web, may actually be governed by fundamental topological principles. It's not just a coincidence. It's a deep structural resonance.
That's the powerful synthesis. And this brings us to another fascinating synergy, the role of narratives and loops. In algebraic topology, specifically persistent homology, that powerful mathematical tool Debagian et al. Used, the first Betty number counts one-dimensional loops. Persistent one-cycles indicate robust topological holes or circuits within a complex system, features that remain stable despite changes in scale or perspective.
So we're talking about actual mathematical loops as robust structures. And this connects back to songlines in a beautifully elegant way, doesn't it? Many songlines are themselves cyclical journeys.
Mm-hmm. Many songlines are indeed loops, mirroring ancestral journeys or seasonal migrations that begin and end at ceremonial sites, traversing landscapes in cyclical patterns, often tied to a specific season or resource cycle. The narrative itself often follows a cyclical structure, like an epic journey that returns to its origin, bringing renewed understanding. The cosmic web, too, is described as being composed of vast filament loops connecting galaxy clusters, interlaced with immense clusters and voids in these large-scale topological circuits. They're like the cosmic highways connecting cities of galaxies.
This is where the speculation really gets wild, and I love it. Could the brain's apparent sensitivity to detecting and encoding these loops actually be leveraged and reinforced by cultural practices like songlines, which are inherently cyclical? Might our deep human enjoyment of circular narratives, epic poems, and even pilgrimages reflect an innate neural preference for creating and recognizing persistent loops?
And, taking it even further, could the cosmic web itself, with its vast interconnected loops of matter, be interpreted as an enormous, unimaginably vast memory palace? a dynamic, evolving structure where the universe stores its own experiences in the very fabric of its connectivity. It's a truly provocative thought about how deep these structural similarities might go, suggesting a fundamental architecture for information.
Another common thread woven through all these sources is this idea of scale invariance. It's like information is encoded across vastly different scales in all three domains we've explored.
Yes, exactly. Songlines encode information across incredibly wide scales, from the precise location of a small waterhole, absolutely vital for survival in an arid landscape, to the mythical continent-spanning migrations of ancestral beings. It's a nested, multi-scale knowledge system. Persistent homology as a mathematical tool is explicitly designed to be scale-dependent. It analyzes topological features across different parameter ranges, meaning the same algorithm can identify loops in the firing patterns of tiny neurons or in the distribution of immense galaxies. And in the cosmic brain comparison, Vodza and Felitti actually rescaled spatial axes to align the spectra of brain tissue and the cosmic web, explicitly hinting at a kind of self-similarity, a hallmark of fractal geometry where patterns repeat at different magnifications.
So it's almost like memory itself is a fractal process, repeating patterns across different levels of organization, from the smallest neural circuit to the largest cosmic structure.
Yeah.
That's a profound thought.
That's the emerging idea. The cosmic web and the brain both exhibit striking fractal-like structures, displaying complex detail at every scale. And if you consider songlines, with their repetition of motifs, nested stories, and cyclical narratives, they too could be seen as cultural fractals, encoding information in self-similar ways across different levels of abstraction and specificity.
This brings us to what could be a unifying language for all of this, a formal mathematical way to describe these incredible connections, simplicial complexes.
This mathematical language offers a powerful unifying framework for understanding these incredibly diverse systems in a rigorous way. In the hippocampal model, as we discussed, vertices correspond to individual place fields, and edges represent the overlaps between those fields. Higher dimensional simplices can represent multiple overlaps or more complex spatial relationships, essentially building a dynamic Lego structure of the brain's spatial map. Each simplex could even encode a narrative element or a conceptual chunk of information.
And how would this apply to mapping songlines and the cosmic web in this same mathematical language?
It's surprisingly direct. Songlines could be mapped onto simplicial complexes. A specific verse in a songline might correspond to a landmark, a vertex in the complex. Shared motifs, repeated narratives, or connections between different stories could then be represented as edges or higher dimensional overlaps, showing how knowledge connects. The resulting simplicial complex could then be seen as a formal, quantifiable representation of a cultural memory network. Similarly, the cosmic web can be rigorously viewed as a massive simplicial complex built from galaxy clusters acting as vertices and the immense filaments connecting them as edges, forming the cosmic backbone.
This sounds like a dream come true for cross-disciplinary research. Suddenly you have a common language for things that seem utterly unrelated.
It absolutely is. The beauty of this is that persistent homology, for instance, could then analyze cultural narratives, neural firing patterns, and cosmic structures using the exact same mathematical algorithms. This would allow researchers to quantify how, for example, the loops detected in ancient songlines correspond to the loops identified in hippocampal co-firing patterns, or even the grand filamentary loops of the cosmic web. This common mathematical framework truly allows us to test the universality of these topological patterns in memory and information storage across all scales.
Okay, this is where we really crank up the weirdness and build some speculative bridges. If we think about songlines through the lens of those cognitive persistence diagrams we discussed earlier, those maps of how long topological features last, what might that imply about cultural memory?
Well, imagine each landmark visited or sung about in a songline. That landmark could correspond to the birth of a topological feature in a mental map, a new connection, or a new loop. As generations repeat and reinforce the songline through ritual and practice, this constant rehearsal might strengthen and stabilize these features, making them persistent in the collective memory, robust against decay. Conversely, forgotten verses or neglected parts of the songline might correspond to features that decay or disappear over time, much like transient cycles in persistent homology. It's a way of modeling cultural memory as an evolving, living topological structure that strengthens with use and fades with neglect.
And those learning regions, Devagian et al., found in the brain that optimal sweet spot for forming stable maps. Could there be cultural equivalents?
Oof.
Could societies, through millennia of practice, intuitively discover optimal ways to transmit knowledge?
It's a truly fascinating thought. One could speculate that cultural practices themselves, Things like the inherent complexity of a narrative, the frequency of its rehearsal through rituals and ceremonies, or the level of community participation in its transmission might empirically optimize the stability and persistence of cultural memory. Perhaps societies, through thousands of years of trial and error, intuitively discovered these optimal combinations, these cultural learning regions, much like the brain finds its ideal parameters for stable map formation. These traditions are, in a way, ancient distributed information systems.
And what about this cosmic memory palace idea? If the universe is structured like this, how might that inform something like artificial intelligence design?
If the cosmic web's heavy-tailed degree distribution implies that some galaxy clusters are extraordinarily connected, those highly central hubs could be seen as analogous to key loci in a memory palace, or sacred vital sites in songlines. Our brains might already exploit such hubness to organize information more efficiently. In our own semantic networks, some concepts like animal or tool have vastly more connections to other concepts than average. These could be seen as cognitive analogs of galaxy clusters, central organizing principles. If these hub structures naturally emerge in complex systems because they optimize information flow and resilience, then the design of artificial intelligence networks could draw on these cosmic network statistics to build more efficient, robust, and perhaps even more intuitive memory architectures for AI.
And finally, that almost spooky numerical coincidence of memory capacity between the human brain and the cosmic web 2.5 petabytes. What deeper meaning could that possibly have? Is it just a coincidence or something more?
It's pure speculation, of course, but it invites profound philosophical reflection. Indigenous cosmologies often posit that the land and the stars are intrinsically linked, with songlines sometimes mapping constellations onto landscapes. This numerical resonance, both systems storing information on the order of petabytes, could it imply a deeper connection between our capacity to model the world and the universe's own intrinsic information content? It might simply be a reflection of the anthropic principle, meaning our brains evolved in a universe whose complexity happens to match our cognitive capacity to perceive and process it. Or, more speculatively, it could suggest that our memory systems are inherently tuned to extract and compress information about a world that is structured by remarkably similar topological principles, making us deeply resonant with the universe's own architecture.
These connections are truly mind-bending, stretching our understanding of memory far beyond what we typically imagine. But as always in science, we must also critically examine the sources and their acknowledged limitations, because often those very limitations point the way to exciting new research. Let's start with the cultural specificity of songlines and the ethical concerns that were rightly raised.
Yes, this is paramount. Rizur and colleagues issued a very clear and emphatic warning. Teaching Aboriginal memory techniques requires profound cultural sensitivity and respect. Without an experienced Indigenous educator, there's a significant risk that non-Aboriginal teachers might inadvertently misrepresent, trivialize, or even appropriate songlines as mere cognitive hacks or simplistic tricks. They are not just techniques, they are part of living, sacred cultural systems, deeply interwoven with identity and ancestral land. Furthermore, the studies acknowledged limitations like the ceiling effect due to high-achieving medical students and the limited long-term retention assessment mean we cannot broadly generalize these findings to all populations or contexts without further, more robust research.
So how do we address these crucial issues and ensure future research is done ethically and effectively?
Future research must prioritize genuine, collaborative partnership with Indigenous communities. This means co-designing studies that fully respect cultural protocols, knowledge systems, and intellectual property rights. This includes using more complex memory tasks that can truly differentiate the power of these methods, moving beyond simple lists and implementing robust, longitudinal designs to measure retention over months or even years, not just weeks. The ethical framework of participatory action research is key here, ensuring mutual benefit and preventing any form of cultural appropriation, truly seeing Indigenous knowledge holders as experts.
Okay, moving to the brain models, Debagian et al. Made some significant simplifications in their computational model of the hippocampus. While groundbreaking, they didn't capture every nuance of real neural dynamics.
Indeed. Their model, while incredibly insightful, simplifies neuronal dynamics considerably. It essentially ignores the finer details of how neurons communicate, like bursting patterns, precise spike timing, or phase precession, focusing primarily on average firing rates. And crucially, it doesn't explicitly model synaptic plasticity, the brain's fundamental ability to learn and change connections over time. Treating firing as a stationary Poisson process and assuming perfect, indefinite memory of all coactivities doesn't fully capture the complex, adaptive, and sometimes messy biological reality of neurons. Also, focusing solely on place cells neglects the vital contributions of other spatial cells, like CRID cells and border cells, which also build spatial maps. Critics could reasonably argue that the topological signatures might emerge from even more complex, unmodeled dynamics.
How can we address these critiques and build even more powerful, accurate brain models moving forward?
The resolution lies in advocating for more sophisticated empirical studies. We need to record large ensembles of place cells in real animals navigating environments with known topological features. Think mazes with complex loops or branching paths, and then apply persistent homology to that actual spike data. Furthermore, future computation models should incorporate biological complexities like synaptic plasticity, realistic forgetting mechanisms, and the intricate interactions between different types of spatial cells. This topological paradigm is a powerful hypothesis, but it absolutely requires continuous refinement and rigorous experimental validation with real biological data to truly understand the brain's internal maps.
And finally, the audacious comparison between brains and galaxies. Comparing apples and galaxies, as the source puts it. What are the criticisms there, and how do we ensure we're not just seeing patterns where none truly exist?
The primary critique, and a very valid one, is that morphological similarity doesn't automatically imply functional similarity. The brain's network evolved through millions of years of developmental and evolutionary pressures, optimizing for cognition, consciousness, and survival. The cosmic web, on the other hand, emerged from the fundamental physics of gravity, dark matter, and cosmic expansion over billions of years. While they look similar, their underlying processes, formation mechanisms, and purpose are radically different. The authors themselves admitted their analysis used only 2D slices, not full 3D connectivity, and that it was insensitive to the brain's crucial long-range synaptic connections. Also, their node identification in the brain based on staining intensity might not accurately represent functional units. And as we noted, the memory capacity comparison remains highly speculative based on estimates.
So how do we push this research forward rigorously, beyond just visual resemblance, to truly test if these universal principles are at play?
Future work needs to move beyond 2D slices and analyze the full three-dimensional connectivity of brain networks using advanced techniques like diffusion imaging or connectomics, and then compare that with full 3D cosmic simulations. We also need to employ more sophisticated graph metrics beyond just degree and clustering, such as path length, modularity, or specific network motifs that reveal deeper organizational principles. Crucially, researchers should examine whether similar network architectures arise in a much broader range of complex systems, from fungal networks to social networks to even economic systems, to truly test if these universal self-organization principles are at play across diverse domains. If common patterns are consistently found across vastly different systems, then the cosmic brain similarity becomes far more than just a coincidence. It hints at a profound truth about complex systems themselves.
So the overall reframing is that these critiques aren't flaws in the fundamental idea itself, but rather incredibly fertile research frontiers, pushing us to be more precise, more ethical, and more comprehensive in our scientific pursuits.
Exactly. Cultural specificity demands ethnographic collaboration and humility, ensuring respect and deeper understanding. Neural simplifications highlight the urgent need for new mathematical tools that can handle realistic biological dynamics with all their complexity. And the cosmic comparison, while speculative, truly shows the immense power of network science and invites us to push its current boundaries by integrating functional data, new metrics, and exploring a much wider array of complex systems. It's an incredibly exciting time to be at the intersection of these fields.
This has been a truly expansive and mind-bending journey. Let's talk about the big implications and the incredibly exciting future directions that emerge from this idea of a universal topology of memory. First, how might understanding memory as topological activity revolutionize pedagogy, how we teach and how we learn?
Well, if memory systems prioritize connectivity and qualitative relations over the rote memorization of discrete, isolated facts, then cognitive training and educational curricula could be fundamentally redesigned. We could emphasize relational mapping, how concepts connect to each other, how stories unfold sequentially, how processes link and form loops, rather than simply memorizing lists or isolated definitions. This aligns remarkably well with indigenous pedagogies that have long taught through immersive stories, journeys, and community engagement. Integrating tools like persistent homology into educational design could even help quantify which narrative structures yield the most persistent and robust cognitive loops in students' minds, potentially allowing us to predict long-term retention based on the topological properties of the material presented.
And where does this leave us in terms of neuroscience meeting indigenous epistemologies? It feels like an incredibly rich intersection.
Songlines powerfully illustrate the human brain's remarkable capacity to harness environmental and narrative structures for enhanced memory encoding. Neuroscientists could conduct empirical studies on how actively navigating real landscapes or even engaging deeply with complex oral narratives like songlines specifically affects hippocampal representations. Does learning a songline actually modulate place cell co-firing patterns and the stability of those topological signatures in the brain? Could engaging in cultural practices like these actually shape the neural parameters, like firing rates or place field sizes, that determine the brain's optimal learning region? Collaborative research with Indigenous communities could unlock profound insights into how culture dynamically shapes and tunes neural plasticity, truly bridging ancient wisdom with modern brain science.
And for artificial intelligence, what are the implications for designing future AI architectures? Most AI currently relies on very different methods of storing information.
You're right. Currently, most AI systems primarily rely on vector spaces and precise metric distances for storing and processing information, which is a very geometric approach. But topological data analysis, with its focus on simplicial complexes, suggests entirely new architectures. Imagine AI systems inspired by songlines and persistent homology, designed to store knowledge not just as points in a numerical space, but as interconnected loops and higher dimensional cavities' robust structural patterns. Such AI could potentially be far more robust to noise and incomplete data, and perhaps even better at navigating complex environments, generating coherent narratives, or compressing vast data sets by extracting their fundamental topological skeletons. This could lead to AI that truly understands context and relationships.
This even extends to philosophical reflection, doesn't it? Thinking about cosmic cognition and entropic principles.
It absolutely does. The striking structural similarity between cosmic and neural networks invites us to reflect on deeper cosmological questions. If complex systems tend to self-organize into similar network structures, regardless of their scale or underlying physics, could it be that the universe is inherently tuned to produce observers capable of understanding it? This isn't to say the universe itself is conscious, but rather that our cognitive architectures might be inherently compatible with, or optimized for, the large-scale structure of the cosmos. Cosmologists could explore whether other hypothetical universes with different physical constants would produce different network statistics, and whether such universes would even be capable of supporting complex cognition or observers like us. It raises profound questions about the relationship between mind and cosmos.
Finally, this clearly calls for integrative methodologies, doesn't it? Bringing together fields that rarely speak to each other.
Absolutely. The unifying mathematical framework of simplicial complexes and persistent homology serves as a powerful invitation for unprecedented collaboration between mathematicians, neuroscientists, anthropologists, and cosmologists. Imagine future projects that apply persistent homology to analyze vast cultural corpora ancient myths, ritual sequences, traditional narratives to identify persistent narrative motifs and their underlying topological structures, or analyzing brain connectivity data to detect specific topological signatures associated with engaging in certain cultural practices. Cosmologists could use these same topological measures to compare simulated universes with different physical parameters, looking for those shared structural patterns. Such truly cross-disciplinary work has the potential to reveal whether topology is indeed a universal language of information and memory across all scales of existence.
This has been an incredible arc, hasn't it? We started with the profound wisdom encoded in indigenous songlines, delved into the intricacies of how our own hippocampal place cells might map space, and then stretched our minds to the truly vast cosmic web of galaxies. At first glance, these domains seem utterly unrelated.
Yet, when examined through the surprising, powerful lens of topological connectivity, profound resonances appear. Songlines store knowledge in narrative journeys anchored to real landscapes, prioritizing sequence and relationship. Hippocampal maps may be generated by co-firing patterns that encode adjacency in loops, not precise distances. And both brain and cosmic networks exhibit strikingly similar clustering and degree statistics, hinting at common fundamental principles of organization.
The central proposition that emerges from all of this is clear. Memory systems across all scales appear to be organized around topological relations, connectivity, cycles, and scale invariance, rather than just mere metric coordinates.
While the evidence is certainly suggestive rather than definitive, and each study has its significant limitations that point to future research, this convergence of ideas across anthropology, algebraic topology, neuroscience, and cosmology truly opens up incredibly fertile ground for future discovery.
This synthesis, of course, urges caution. Cultural practices like songlines cannot be reduced to simple cognitive hacks without honoring their deep context and meaning. Mathematical models must be rigorously grounded in empirical data, and cross-scale comparisons should always avoid anthropocentric metaphors that oversimplify the vast differences between systems.
Yet, the potential rewards are immense. Understanding memory through this topological lens could revolutionize how we approach pedagogy and learning. It could inspire entirely new neural models and artificial intelligence architectures, leading to systems that are more robust and intuitive. And at its most profound, it might even alter our fundamental view of the universe and our place within its intricate, interconnected tapestry.
This deep dive offers less a final theory than an invitation to walk new paths, trace new loops, and map the invisible connections that weave mind, culture, and cosmos into a coherent whole. What stands out to you from this incredible convergence of ideas?